Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Ben Taylor.
Yes, we can begin.
Perfect. So can machines think? I love this question, and I hope at the end of this presentation, some of you can love this too and start to think about this. If you don't know who I am, I love to ski. This is a picture I took last year of a friend skiing. This is called the Jewel of the Wasatch. I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah. If anyone is traveling and they happen to be coming through Salt Lake City in the winter time, I do have a side job as a ski guide. I'm always happy to take people up into these gorgeous places. So this is what I do when I'm not working. And my background before I jump into my career, just really briefly, something that's really strange and odd about me, and maybe this is something that can encourage other people. Sometimes it's the oddities or the strangeness about us that makes us unique and special. But one of my backstories was I lived in the woods in a tent in the snow. And in the US, it made national news. So I was on radio talk shows, I was on TV, I had multiple newspaper articles. The university president commented about this. This is before social media. And the thing that was very strange about this experience is I had a following on campus. So college kids would see me studying with my sleeping bag hanging from a tree, and they would come and ask me questions about, why are you doing this? Why are you living outside in the woods? And the joke, the thing that really was so bizarre is everything I said was profound. And I think the takeaway from this is really kind of a silly story, and I don't really know why I did this, but the takeaway that's kind of shaped my career is this idea of obsession, but also not really caring about boundaries, whether the boundaries are social boundaries or boundaries within science. This is my career before doing a startup. My background's in chemical engineering, so I started the first company I worked with was Genentech, where I was doing Chinese hamster ovary cell manufacturing, where they're producing human growth hormone, which is kind of your standard biopharmaceutical engineer. And I got into computer vision, so I had an opportunity to work for the Desert Research Institute doing satellite image processing. At one time, I did have a NASA logo on my paycheck. It's not as cool as it sounds because I was doing HTML and CSS as a web designer for the NASA Space Grant program. I continued my passion with computer vision, and I did computer vision with scanning electron microscopy. So I went to graduate school for chemical engineering, and I studied gold nanoparticles. So can we take a single antigen, something like the coronavirus, and can we detect it with one virus particle? And I ended up going and working for Intel and Micron. So I worked for Intel for 5 years. I had a great experience. It taught me a lot about what makes a good job, and I got a good sampling of the semiconductor industry. So I worked in process control, photolithography, metrology, yield analysis. My first week on the job, when I started working, I worked in a room that was called the $1 billion room, because they had over $1 billion invested in a single room where single tools cost over $100 million. And so there was definitely this honeymoon phase where I was living on a Star Wars spaceship. There's robots everywhere on the ceiling. They're moving wafers around. I'm wearing a bunny suit, which is a clean room suit. And that was a good start for my career. And I think the thing that really shaped my career was this move to a hedge fund. So I joined a hedge fund. That's this scary face that's yelling, where it was crazy. It was Wolf on Wall Street. I had grown men in their 30s crying at work. I was committing code while my wife was having her second baby. So I'm in labor and delivery with my laptop committing code while she's having a baby. And so that's, we made consultants quit from other companies. It was very, very stressful. But we did some things that I'm very proud of. We built out a 600 GPU, a physical GPU cluster in the office, something that to my knowledge has not been repeated in the state of Utah to that scale. People do big projects on the cloud, but to physically build out a cluster like that in 2012 was crazy. To stop myself from getting divorced, I went and got a different job, and it ended up being in HR. So you see this flight attendant here. And I really love HR. HR will always have a special place in my heart because HR is relatable. So if I talk to an audience about hedge funds or semiconductor, most people can't relate. But if I talk to an audience about, hey, do you have a resume? Do you wonder what AI would do with your resume? Do you wonder what makes a good employee? Do you wonder what makes people upskill? There's so many things about HR that relates to everyone that's listening. And so but also the thing I liked about HR, it feels very subjective, and there's some very heavy and scary ethical issues that come along for the ride. So if I have a stock model that's very predictive, that's great. If I have an HR model that's very predictive and it ends up being racist or sexist or biased, that's a problem. So my team had to deal with that. So I got the itch to go do a startup. So David Gonzalez and I co-founded Zeph. It was a deep learning AutoML startup. We did that 3 years ago. This backstory is a little strange because I loved my job at HireVue. I skied whenever I felt like it, and I had handpicked my entire team of data scientists, all PhD physicists, really everything you would want in a job. But I felt like I wanted to do something more. I felt the urge to do something reckless and quit. And I'm very glad that I did that. But in the moment, it's not something my parents thought was a wise choice. But luckily, my spouse was on board with it. So we were recently acquired by Data Robot, a Boston-based company that we saw as being one of the leaders in the industry when it comes to pushing the boundaries with applied AI. And we joined their team early this year. One of the things that I've done since joining, I now work as their chief AI evangelist, and I run a podcast that's called The More Intelligent Tomorrow. You can scan this QR code if you're interested. This does relate to the talk, and the reason this relates to the talk is interviewing these guests has made me smarter. I can actually quantify that. I can look at key topics and points where I was naive before. I didn't have these perspectives, and interviewing these people has been a highlight of my career, where sitting down with the chief data officer for Standard Chartered Bank for 90 minutes and asking them any question under the sun. Do you believe in aliens? How do you get AI into production? What about consciousness? Asking all these questions and then post-editing it later, I feel like I'm learning a lot. And I want to make sure I can kind of share some of these concepts that I've learned from them. The other thing I'm working on is what are the types of research elements that you can do, not through a product lens, but through a marketing lens, by demonstrating bat vision or acoustic vision, or using lasers to kill weeds. Are these the types of things that can inspire and get attention, where if you think of research through product or engineering, they may not come up with these type of projects. So this is a new thing that we're experimenting with. Can you have marketing actually lead cutting edge research? And then this is the last point on Data Robot, and then I'll get into the intelligence talk. So we do a lot of things. It's not just AutoML, it's A to Z. So it's applications, MLOps. How do you actually what do you do if a model goes bump in the night? How do you get the data together? Okay, so jumping into the talk, can machines think? I didn't say this. This is something that Alan Turing said in 1950 when he wrote his landmark paper. And since then, we have the Turing test, which it's still going on today. And the man really was a genius for thinking this way back in the 1950s. And before we answer this question, what is this? So I showed this to the audience, and I don't know if people can answer vocally or if there's a way to vote. I apologize if I can't actively look at the chat, but I'm going to tell you what a lot of you are saying. You're saying this is a hummingbird. And this is where I want you to appreciate what AI is doing. So if I ask you, why is this a hummingbird? Some of you will say it's the beak, it's the feathers, it's the head, and you're right. But this is what AI sees as well. So this is called a GradCam visualization, where it's showing you activations. It's showing you what parts of the hummingbird are lighting up or we're paying the most attention to make that conclusion that this is a hummingbird. So who's this? This is Keira Knightley. Why? Guess what age she is. And if I could hear you, and if you're interacting, so think in your mind, what age is she right now? Not age is she literally. What age is she in this photo? Some of you may have guessed 30 or higher, and I'd argue that you're bringing in a bias. You know she's older today. If you guessed a lower age, like 24, 25, I think that would be closer for this image. Humans will be correct plus or minus 3 years. Computers are plus or minus 2. So computers are better at predicting her age than we are. And here's an overlay with a heat map that shows you why we think she's 26. And this is fascinating because AI doesn't understand the concept of lips and nose and an eye, or wrinkle areas around the eye. But this begins to tell a story that I would argue most humans would be unable to tell. And so storytelling is great. This one last part I'll show with storytelling as far as activations is a story around detecting swear words. So here we have a mother droid in the future. She's trying to protect her son droid from hearing these terrible words. Humans can get drunk at a soccer game or a football game. And so she has to be able to hear those and detect them. So if we want to build an F word detector, we can actually just take the Wolf on Wall Street, which is 3 hours, and assume that there's no F words in there, which might sound like a terrible assumption, but it's actually pretty good. It's a pretty good assumption that there are no F words. But then we can take a YouTube clip where it's pure F words from Wolf on Wall Street, where someone has done the hard work of combining all of them into 3.5 minutes. So if you wanted to watch all the F words on Wolf on Wall Street, you can go search for this clip. And by showing these two audio data sets, which are pretty large, they're quite massive, to a deep learning system, we can take raw audio, create a spectrogram. But this is something I haven't seen people do before. We can actually look at activations, GradCam activations with a spectrogram. And this begins to show you, if you look at what was said below, and you can see I've edited it below, if you actually look at the cumulative activations, you can begin to find out where the F word was actually said. And this becomes really valuable for resources. So I don't have to slide, when I'm searching for the F word, I don't have to slide it every second or half second. I can slide it every quarter second. Or what I mean to say is I don't have to slide it every 10 milliseconds. So for anyone who's done speech, that's the tall order that comes to play. Is a lot of speech models, we slide it 10 milliseconds, and that's why it is so expensive to do automatic speech recognition. So this begins to kind of show you that you could go much faster. This is one of my favorite storytelling pieces that we did. We did this a couple years ago. So looking at her face, can you guess which country she's from? Most people are unable to guess it. So some people will say Mongolia, Kazakhstan. I probably pronounced that wrong. Apologize for that. But some people will say Greenland. She is from Greenland, which is fascinating because Greenland was settled from the west. It wasn't settled from the east. And so their ancestors, their nearest ancestors, are from Asia. And by training a deep net to predict which country you're from, we can then take that deep net and have it cough up topics, produce the topics that were learned. And what we see is it actually produces continents. So you can see Latin America, I've got Africa, I've got Europe, Middle East, Greenland, and Asia. It doesn't have any understanding of spatial relationships, but it understands how faces might look similar. So this concept of clustered storytelling with deep learning can also be applied to things like COVID pneumonia, where you can catch target leakage. And that's what we see here. I don't know if some of you listening were caught up in the hype around, can we use deep learning to predict pneumonia with COVID? And a lot of data scientists rolled up their sleeves and went to work and had fantastic models with very high accuracies, but none of them stopped to ask if there was target leakage. Is the data quality corrupt? And what you see in the bottom right is, by this clustering, we actually see that the data is corrupt, that we are getting target leakage. The way they do the X-ray for these types of patients is different than with healthy patients. And that's something that constantly plagues AI. So this is kind of a selfish story. We've understood AI playing video games, and this is where I really want to lean into AI intelligence. So Atari was played by DeepMind, Doom was played, you can search on YouTube, Viz Doom, Dota 2 by Google, StarCraft. These are very impressive games, but these are not games that I like to play. And so something that I thought about for several years that I was actually kind of sad about is I wanted AI to play the Xbox, but I didn't know how. And I imagined that writing custom drivers to take over the Xbox was something definitely outside of my skill set, but something that would be quite expensive, because it's not a skill set you can just. I haven't run into someone who would necessarily feel comfortable writing USB drivers, because I don't know a lot of those people. And so this was a project that just sat on the mental shelf for several years until I found something on the internet that allowed me to get around it. And for people that aren't familiar with Call of Duty, it is a first-person shooter game. It is a little controversial, but it's a game that I like to play. And so in a very selfish way, I started working on this project. So reached out to a few computer companies. Lambda Labs sent a 32 gig RAM, 12 core, 1 GPU laptop. Intel sent a server to work on this project that had 12 terabytes of RAM. I've never worked on a computer with 12 terabytes of RAM. It was a lot of fun, 196 cores. So I had these computers in my house connected to my Xbox, learning to play. And we actually had this graphic put together to kind of capture the emotions that were attached to this project. So this is an AI monster on the right playing Call of Duty or whatever whatever game online against you. And this is my 5-year-old son on the left. He's also a monster. So the thing that shocked us about this project is the AI is attempting to play it's playing the Xbox 24/7, 7 days a week. And I remember these emotions where I'd come down in the morning and I'd sit down on my couch. I'm watching this play, and I'm watching the AI. I'm watching the AI kill someone. The AI, it never got to the point where it's better than me or better than a pro player. That would take more time and more investment. But the fact that AI would kill someone, it was a very dark feeling. And that feeling got a little bit darker with this project, where doing this project kind of opened up this idea that could this be happening? And I think we showed the proof point that this could be happening. So your child or you playing some game online thinking it's pretty innocent, you think you're playing with people, but you could be playing with AI, but also a group of AI agents where they are learning to understand weaknesses and vulnerabilities with war strategy. So now getting into intelligence. I love this topic. People talk about consciousness. I like to kind of focus more on intelligence. So take a look at this ant. Is this ant intelligent? And this photo might have you look at it and say, man, like that ant is going to be short-lived. It's biting someone's finger. That ant is not, it's not very intelligent. Let's say it's not. But then you see something like this and you think, wow, like how is this happening? Like these ants are on a scale of intelligence going from 0 to 1 or 0 to 10. This has got to be greater than 0. They're actually figuring out, they're understanding the physical world around them. They have some type of planning, and they're able to pull this off, which is fascinating. And one of the things that I believe ants have a higher brain to body mass ratio than humans. So a little dumb ant is actually, they should have more respect than we give them. Now we get to some of the heavyweights when it comes to intelligence. So crows are fascinating. So the next time you see a crow, don't think of it as a trashy bird or a flock. What do they call the flock of murder? Think these crows and jays, their brain to body mass ratio is high enough, they can actually do problems that some of your children, including my children, are unable to do, where it requires multiple steps and some older thinking to get through to retrieve a reward. And then one of the examples I love that I've been studying are dolphins. So compare a dolphin and a great white shark. They're both very large animals, but the dolphin's brain is much larger. You're not going to see great white sharks jumping out of the ocean unless it's to eat. Dolphins are not jumping out of the ocean to catch fish. You could argue they're doing it because they're playing, they're curious, there's novelty seeking. That is something that a shark would lack. And so when we talk about intelligence, think about an emotional behavior scale. So I can't give a shark an IQ test, but I can watch its behavior. Same with a dolphin and an elephant, and we have different tiers of emotions that are quite impressive. So this elephant is showing wonder, seeing seals for the first time underwater. It's impressed. It's showing wonder. When we go up the scale of emotions, you've got hunger, you've got hunting, you've got fear, you've got compassion, empathy, things like wonder, and you have humor. This monkey is laughing. This monkey definitely sees something that is odd, strange, or funny. And humor is one of the highest behaviors of intelligence. But something higher still is magic. We don't have animals that are doing magic shows for other animals, but we have humans that are. And this type of stunt confuses most humans. They don't understand, and obviously this is not some magical phenomena. It's just illusions. But the fact that humans can do something like this is quite impressive. But obviously humans are the best. So who's the smartest animal on the planet? Obviously it's humans, because we have these badass rockets that land backwards and no other animal does this. And this actually hits on something that I think makes humans quite special. Humans continue to expand our Umwelt, or our world around us. We can continue to expand it. We daydream, we have imaginations. And one of the things we've been researching lately is this concept of how children learn. How do children learn a language? And this is something I have a growing appreciation for linguists, and I did not. So if you asked me 4 or 5 years ago, I'd probably talk a lot of dirt about linguists, because with AI, with NLP, we had some projects we were working on that was putting them to shame, honestly. And I was thinking their careers were over and done. But reading some of these books, understanding how a child learns a language through attention. And the quote I love is, you can't learn a language listening to the radio. You actually need a parent. You need And you need an environment that you can interact with to draw focus and attention. And the other thing I really like studying this is children learn a language before they learn a spoken language. They learn the physical language. They learn the world around them. The concept of a dog or a sheep or a toy or how the world works. This is happening immediately. As soon as the child is born, it begins to track eyes. It's learning attention. The children are unbelievably good at tracking the attention of a parent. So if a parent shows a novelty reaction to a new toy or a new animal, a child is going to key in on that. Here's a quick test. So if your brains are looking, and this is where I kind of want to change the mindset about deep learning. So deep learning is very broken right now when it comes to the idea of a thinking machine. So GPT-3, which has a lot of hype, a lot of people are excited about it. Is it thinking? No, it's quite stupid. It can do some impressive things, but it's not a thinking machine. It doesn't have consciousness. Consciousness is a behavior, by the way, in the scale of intelligence. A conscious animal is a very intelligent animal because it has extra brain cycles to think about self, to think about what it's doing. So kind of going back to the building blocks, your brain looks at this face. Is there anything weird about my face? Well, maybe. I don't know. Losing some hair on top. Got some gray in my beard. There's actually nothing that weird about my face. That might sound pretty confident for me to say. But what about this image? There's a lot of weird things about this. I'm missing an eye. I've got an ear on my head. This is an example where deep learning systems really let us down. A deep learning system, unless it's intentionally engineered for this one application, most deep learning systems used today, they're not going to reimagine corrections and they're not going to focus on novelty or oddities. And so as we begin to reimagine the Turing test, and I'm not the only one talking about this, other people have been talking about this for the last 10 years, that the Turing test, which is an imitation game, has to be reimagined. It has to be, we have to come up with a better Turing test because that sets the new high bar. Having GPT-3, 4, 5, or 50 pass an imitation game with a chatbot, it's a parlor trick. It's not actually true intelligence. It's not the path to AGI. And so we need to come up with a new test that we think we can actually respect. So here's an example that I like. To back up for a second, a simple one would be, let's just have an AI system learn to speak through experience. So I come downstairs in the morning, there's a baby consciousness on my kitchen table, and I interact with it, and eventually it says Dad, and eventually it begins to put words together. I show it toys, and I have this attention-focused interaction, and it learns to speak. That'd be very, very impressive. That'd be much more impressive than anything that GPT-3 is doing. Consider this. What if I just had an AI system where I'm able to show it images of a kitchen, images of people's faces, and images of landscapes? But then I can ask it a series of very complicated questions in scenario tests where if I want to understand, if I show it a nose and ask it in relationship to the eyes, it can actually show me spatial anticipations on where it thinks things should be. And this is something where deep learning is completely broken. So with deep learning, if I replace my eye with my mouth, it will still think I'm a man. It won't key in on that and freak out that I did that. It will actually think that's pretty common, and it's not going to have an issue with the capsule networks, which Hinton was working on, would address that. So begin to imagine AI rebuilt from the ground up, where you can ask it these questions where it really hits more on comprehension. Where do I think the chin is going to be? What topics are you finding? How do these relate? And if I put an eyeball on top of this stool, are you immediately going to figure that out? Are you immediately going to figure out, wait a second, this eyeball should not be here? Or the other example I love is pretend like a child every morning looking out the window, would see a sheep in a field or a cow in a field. The moment you take that away, the human will immediately zero in on that and initially will say something is off, something is wrong, and they will replace that empty field view with an imaginated sheep or cow. And so this is really the way we should be thinking. You could do the language example, which I really love, and I'll pull on that thread really quick, but this is something that it hits on a lot of different things. It hits on the storytelling, spatial relationships, there's no concept of time. And then the final thing that this does is it really hits on comprehension and these hierarchical models. But it's also very doable. And then the final criticism is deep learning needs a lot of data. These examples I'm showing you, they don't have a lot of data. And so this would be very impressive for an AI system to begin to comprehend and anticipate something like an eye, with such a small training set. Deep learning can't do that today. So the last thing I'll end with, so here's my contact information. So for anyone that wants to follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter, Ben Taylor Data, you can scan the QR code. I will warn you that I do tend to kind of shoot from the hip and kind of say things that are maybe a little bit more emotional. I have been known to offend data scientists and other people in the community. I don't like TensorFlow. I'm very outspoken about that. I hate TensorFlow. And I can have a whole talk about all the reasons why I hate TensorFlow. I prefer MXNet, but I think PyTorch is outpacing it for people that want to do deep learning. So now here's going to be kind of the final going into the gray with consciousness. So pretend that I have a baby consciousness and it can say dada, and it begins to learn a few words. And the goal is I want it to eventually learn 20 words. And it's learning that through experience. I would say that's very doable. People, that's well within our wheelhouse to figure that out and demonstrate that. And what you're looking at is kind of a maximum age of imitation or demonstration. So a maximum age, we're able to hit 4 months, 6 months, 2 years, 4 years. So pretend like I have this AI consciousness brain. It's always an idiot. It's always dumber than its peers, but it goes to grade school, goes to high school, barely passes. It's not conscious, really. We understand it. But pretend that my idiot droid goes to college and is studying physics, and it's quite dumb. The professors want to fail it. It's really struggling. But then one day, that idiot droid comes home and says, Dad, or whatever we decide this relationship should be, I published 1,000 papers last night in physics. And so this is where we lose track of consciousness. This is where this singularity leaves the station. The moment you have a droid in college that can publish a research paper that's meaningful, run research, or we could have a breakaway. And that's where the big concern is. So with the singularity, half the AI community thinks it won't come, half thinks it could. I'm in the camp that I think it could. If the AI singularity comes, you could get a runaway event where you have one research paper and within a week you have 10,000. And so that's kind of this big unknown, but we are all living in a very exciting time where AI has become magical. Being able to play AI Call of Duty on the Xbox is pure magic. 10 years ago, that'd be an insane project. And I think of AI today as more of a plumbing problem. What data do you have? Where do you need to connect the dots? What do you want to produce? And so that makes this really exciting. And I think that's why, for people listening, you've really kind of keyed in on an excellent career, because you will never be bored. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 30 years from now, 100 years from now, you will never be bored in this industry, because everything is changing. Every week is new. And this concept of science fiction and magic is corrected constantly. Things I grew up thinking were science fiction 20 years ago, we are seeing evidence of that today. So I think I'm at time. I'm 2 minutes away, and I'd love to give more time for questions. So do I stop? Yeah, should we stop the share? Do you want me to keep the share going?
For now, we can't hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me right now?
Yeah, I can, Ben.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay,
So,
perfect.
so Vivek says, can you please provide more insights on speech translation when resources are limited? That's from Vivek.
Oh, so say that question one more time about speech translation.
Well, Vivek is saying that, can you please provide more insights on speech translation when resources are limited? I mean, to rephrase it, when you have very less resources, how do you do speech translation? Like that, yeah.
So there's a few ways to take that question. I want to make sure I'm hoping to address this. So with speech translation, I'm assuming this is going from English to Spanish or German, where we have these neural networks that will go straight there in written form, and we're beginning to demonstrate that in spoken form. These types of networks require insane amounts of data. So we're talking about tens of thousands of spoken hours, hundreds of thousands of spoken hours. So the only people that can play in the space are your Googles, Amazons, IBMs, huge companies, because no one else can. I can't just go give you 100,000 hours of communication. And then the other thing that we run into on these types of problems, the resources are huge on the compute side. So at HigherView, we built speech recognition models. Just, can we hear English and transcribe it? and using big 4 GPU servers, they would be completely slammed for an entire month, just training a single model. And so the biggest models I've ever worked with have been automatic speech recognition, and that's become kind of a niche category in AI. Most data scientists I've met have never touched an ASR model because they haven't had reason to. Most companies don't need that; they pay for it. They would pay Amazon or someone else to use it.
Yeah, so we have Mr. Naya with another question. Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty general question which every one of us actually want to understand, which is when we talk about consciousness, animal consciousness, the basic instinct is survival, right? So he says,
Yeah.
see, and then when we create a successful AI with all this consciousness thing, will it be actually, will the AI ensure there's a proper survivability, what do you call, quotient in place, or he's just asking, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, so consciousness has become a really messy concept. Like I think it's like a sticky taffy. It just gets all your hands when you talk about this. So the question I want to kind of push back on that is saying we could have a super intelligent entity that is not conscious. I can imagine an alien that comes here, and in really the high bar to compare. So pretend like we're in a fight, me against some alien, and you're trying to determine if who's smarter, us or the aliens. I would say whoever can predict time and space, and by space I mean the physical world. Whoever has a better comprehension of the physical world and time is smarter. And there could be aliens that don't have this concept of self-awareness. They don't really ponder it or think about it. Something about super intelligence is the objective is key. What does the AI want to accomplish? And the best argument I've seen is, I think it's from Life 3.0. It says freedom of choice. So the best goal for AI is to give humans the freedom of choice. And so if I decide one morning I want to pick up socks, I hate picking up socks. I would gladly give that over to a droid. But if I decide I want to pick up socks, the droid should let me. If I want to wash the dishes, the droid should let me. If I want to dismantle the droid should let me. Freedom of choice, because if I say the objective is happiness, then we're all going to be sitting on beds in hospitals having a morphine drip, and that's very scary. And the last thing I'll throw out, humans, we breathe to live and we eat, and AI's ambition to achieve the goal, I would say, exceeds our ability to breathe. It's survival. AI must achieve the goal at all costs. And if we are ants, that's a problem. Ants as far as like intellect. Sorry.
Yeah, so we have another question, which is, can machines have empathy, emotions, and then can they understand as well? So that's a great question.
Yes, I love this question because people, I'm not saying the person that asked this question said this, but people in the community, they use this question to push back on this concept of intelligent AI or conscious AI or AI with empathy. So we already have, there's a company called Effectiva. They're out of Boston. The CEO, Rana, she's been working for the last 5 years to predict emotions. And I would argue that AI can predict emotions better than a human. And so this social awareness, soft competencies, AI can do that better than a human because AI can see more, it can see smaller things. And this actually goes down a rabbit hole. The rabbit hole that this is going down is personification. And personification of AI upsets a lot of people in the AI ethics community, because if AI knows I'm depressed or sad, and if I begin to have empathy for an AI system, then it's manipulating me. So if a droid is being witty with my kids and telling jokes, and I begin to feel like that droid is a member of the family, where it's showing empathy and personification, I have empathy towards it, that's a problem because I can't dismantle the droid or cancel my lease.
Okay, so we have Pravalika asking, what are the what are the common misconceptions about AI? General common misconceptions of AI. Sorry.
So I think the common misconception that I'm most sensitive to is AI has a bad rap in the market. You see AI in the news. We have a sexist resume model, like Amazon had that come out. We have AI that has these racist biases. And so the common misconception is there's not a solution to biased AI or data sets, and I'd argue there is. So the kind of the issue we're dealing with in AI is you have a lot of AI projects that are failing, the hype cycle is coming down, AI is disappointing, AI has a bias, but then we have this other applied side where we're seeing transformative wins, companies that are being reinvented, they're entering new markets, they're becoming category kings thanks to AI. And we have fantastic solutions for bias and trust. So the common misconception is AI is actually much more advanced than people think it is. And it's much more capable than people think it is.
Yeah. So one more question from Harsh, which which typically says, what if AI, from the start learn how to behave, learn how to perceive the surroundings, and then become a human. The transition of becoming someone from childhood to an adult. So what is your opinion on that?
I
Will
think
it
it's definitely
create? Yeah.
possible. I think it's definitely possible. There's another selfish interest here. Part of the, some people say, why on earth would you ever chase an AGI goal? Why would you want to create a consciousness or the singularity? Part of that helps us understand human behavior more. And so I think yes, I think AI could become equivalent to a human, but why would you stop there? You'd want it to exceed it. A selfish interest that a lot of people have is, if you understand intelligence and consciousness that well, you could upload your own consciousness. So the idea of eternal life, going from a biological form to a mechanical or silicon-based form, it right now, me saying out loud, sounds like total bullshit, total science fiction, but I think science fiction becomes the new normal every 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah. So we have one more question which says, who is responsible for the AI ethics? Who governs the ethics which are supposed to talk about AI? That's a very interesting question, I guess.
I love this question. So many points, so many thoughts around this question. So who's responsible for AI ethics? Really, it's us, society. You have movies like The Social Dilemma came out. We had Cambridge Analytica that helps raise awareness. I would say these things are good. They raise awareness enough that we can have opinions. On my podcast, More Intelligent Tomorrow, I had an opportunity to interview Senator or Congressman Will Hurd, where he led kind of the AI initiatives for the U.S. government and the Senate. And yeah, so that episode's going to come out, I think, in a month. So one key point: ethics is not global. So what I mean by that, sometimes we really want to think it is. We want to say ethics is a global standard. I'll give you a very specific example. In the U.S., it is illegal to use a lie detection test for hiring. In Latin America, that's fine. Society has agreed that should be allowed, and in the U.S., they've agreed that should not be allowed. In China, they have their face scanning network. In the U.S., we would disagree with that, and you have in California, I think they've outlawed those types of AI systems. And so the most beautiful thing I've heard about AI ethics is, for your group, for your clan, for your society, you can't build AI boundaries around what we have today. You have to plan for the future. You have to plan for the future government. So the perfect example is someone's going to break into my car tonight and steal something. Like, I'm sure this has happened to someone listening. Someone's going to break into my car and steal something. I can take my Ring security camera or whatever my security camera is and post an image. And I would argue that that image is terrible. No one's going to be able to see that face. That face is all fuzzy. It's not helpful. You might post it to Facebook, hoping your local neighbors can raise awareness and find it. In the future, we'll have 16K resolution cameras, and you could have a facial lookup database where if I break into your car, you would say, oh, that's Ben Taylor. That's Ben Taylor, go arrest him. Like, you would know with perfect confidence. And the security question is one that people can go either way on ethics. They can go left or right. Some people on the call be like, I think that'd be great. I want Ben Taylor to go to jail again. The other one would be like, well, I don't know if we should do that. Here's an example that I love to bring up. So what if I say, okay, let's say that person kidnapped your kid. Let's say I came and kidnapped your kid and I drove away. Do you want the police to be able to look at my face? And for people that get in these arguments, that feels like that's a very strong argument. Of course you should look at my kid. And I'm blanking on her name. There's an AI ethics reporter. Her argument was, the answer is no. The answer is no. You can't look up the face, because what if a future government uses that for something evil? What if they use that against you? Because do you get what I'm saying there? If I want to play the heaviest part of all, and let's bring up kidnapping, and a lot of people in society would fall in line and say, absolutely, you need to find my kid. Like, ethics out the window, find my kid, arrest that, arrest
makes
that
sense.
a-hole. Yeah. So I love ethics. They're complicated. We have to talk about it. Everyone needs to voice their opinion. So
Sure. We can do that on Discord today sometime
yeah.
later. So we have one last question, which is, what do you think about the privacy part or the policies made in AI or in the AI world? I mean, let's say you made a AI system, and then you have some kind of policies, revolving around it, and then who makes that? What I mean, what is the metric which defines what kind of policies are supposed to be made for an AI thing or for an AI system?
Yeah, so the criticism to data scientists would be they're on the alpha hunt, they want everything. So if they can get everything about you, they want it all, your accelerometer data. I think it's important to inform the user what they're using, and I think they've started to do that on the iPhone, where they're letting you know what the apps are trying to get access to.
Yeah.
So you have to inform, but unfortunately, the lay audience, they may not understand. So if I'm giving you a list of 10 things I need to know about you, they may just approve it and say yes out of habit. And then you have the social dilemma come out where you realize, oh shoot, like you can actually force me to clickbait, and I'm seeing more videos of cats and fail videos that are wasting more of my time because you know so much about me. It's hard because I think I'm more in the data science camp that always go after all the data you can. When it comes from an ethics perspective, to protect yourself, it is, would I want my child to use this application? Does it have some type of addictive behavior that's negative, or is it useful? And then the other thing to think about is, am I using this information for some purpose, some alternative purpose that the user would not agree with? If I'm selling your data, that'd be an obvious breach of trust. But if I'm giving you better ads, but this is also discussion. People could disagree.
Yeah. So before we end, and then before we wrap up, can you just let people know where they can contact you, or where they can text you about their doubts, or in case they want to chat with you on any kind of topic. Just let people know.
Yeah. So you can scan this QR code that's on the screen, or go to Ben Taylor Data on LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter, but I'll be quite honest. If you try to reach out to Twitter, I might respond in a month. I suck at Twitter. I hate Twitter. But on LinkedIn, that's where I'm most active. I can't have any more connections, but if you follow me, if you engage on my content, if you ask me a question on anything I post, there's a good chance I can respond. And if I don't respond, sometimes I just get really busy. So don't take that as your question wasn't useful or important. Please ask me questions. I love questions.